A pilot and two young girls go missing in a small Piper aircraft to be found the next day, having survived a night on the wing of the partially submerged airplane on an icy Alaska lake. They're okay, which is good news, but there's some troubling news here in this story, and we're going to cover that on this episode of Taking Off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken, and news out of Alaska is distressing on several levels and highlights a problem we have in aviation, which we'll get to. But first, the story. A small Piper three-seater went missing overnight in Alaska with a father and two small daughters on board, and many feared the worst, and a bunch of pilots volunteered to mount a search. The good news, they were found alive and okay. And here's the details of the flight. The pilot, John Morris Jr., flew out of Soldotna Airport on Sunday, March 23, 2025, with his two young daughters. And they landed on an icy lake, but it's unclear whether he did it on purpose or if for an emergency. The plane was reported missing near Tustumena Lake on Alaska's Kenai Peninsula, 80 miles southwest of Anchorage. Eventually, the plane was spotted by Terry Goads, one of the dozen volunteer pilots who went out searching. Goads reports to the Associated Press that initially, when he flew over the lake, he thought he had discovered the wreckage. He said, "It kind of broke my heart to see that, but as I got closer down and lower, I could see that there's three people on top of the wing." The Alaska National Guard fired up a rescue helicopter from Anchorage on Monday, March 24th, and was able to pull the three from the wing and transport them to a nearby hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. According to the helicopter's pilot and rescue crew chief, they said it appeared that the plane had landed near a glacier on the partially frozen lake, broke through the ice as it rolled to a stop, and then began to sink. It isn't known if the pilot landed intentionally on the ice or whether there was a mechanical problem that caused him to set it down. But you can definitely see the tracks of the plane on the ice, and where it came to rest is where it started to sink. It's being reported that the plane's fabric-covered wings acted as a flotation device and kept it from fully sinking, and also the tail refreezing in the ice helped keep it from sinking. Morris was able to get the two girls out and on the wing without them getting wet, but Morris got wet and was suffering from hypothermia by the time the rescuers arrived. The news of the rescue was welcome relief to the far worse outcome last month, in which 10 people in a Cessna Caravan crashed on an ice floe in Alaska and everyone perished. Now, while it's great news that everyone's okay here, the really bad news or bad judgment part is coming up. But first, let's talk about the plane, a Piper PA-12. It's a three-seat aircraft that was produced by Piper in 1946 to 48. The normal configuration is the pilot to sit up front and two seats behind the pilot side by side for passengers. And this is different than the popular Piper Cub, which traditionally is flown from the back seat. The Super Cruiser can be fitted with wheels, skis, or floats, and it's unsure which gear this particular PA-12 had installed at the time of the accident, but in an earlier picture of the actual plane, it has wheels. And looking at the registration database, it appears Morris bought the plane in 2021, and it has an O235, which is a 115 horsepower engine. And while the plane was manufactured in the 40s, this one has an airworthiness date of 1956. And according to the Associated Press, Morris is not talking to authorities about what happened. You see, the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, has started a disciplinary action against Morris, as told by NTSB investigator Mark Ward. Here's the part that's easy to get angry about. According to the FAA, Morris is a student pilot, having gotten his student license in 2018. And he has a history of violating the no passenger rule. And for those who don't know how a pilot's license or certificate works, when you first begin to learn to fly, you first get a student pilot's license. And by the way, some pilots get bent out of shape on the use of the word license instead of certificate. But actually, the FAA uses both words, so I will too. Anyway, with that student pilot license, you are prohibited from taking passengers. You can fly with an instructor, and you can fly solo with an endorsement from an instructor, but you cannot carry passengers. It's another of the rules that have been created in blood. When you train to get that initial pilot certificate here in the U.S., the private pilot, the very first time you can carry a passenger is for the check ride, the test where you prove to an FAA designated examiner that you are ready to safely and capably fly that airplane. Before that moment, you are not allowed to carry passengers. And for people flying without pilot's license, there are two flavors: those who never bothered to get a license and those who had a license but lost it and never got it back. Recently, another crash of a small Taylorcraft airplane in Alaska took the lives of two men, and neither of them had a pilot certificate. Because aviation is based primarily on the honor system, some people choose to abuse that. There aren't FAA cops at the airports checking certificates and licenses to see if you're legal to fly. And just recently, a flight instructor who lost his certificate continued to instruct. He was flying with a student and faced an emergency and crashed, killing the student pilot. And he's now been indicted for manslaughter. And we covered this continuing story recently. The instructor had lost his certificate because, according to the FAA, for a lack of competency. Near where I am in West Texas, a rancher bought a Cirrus SR-22, a nice plane, which he regularly flew with passengers. He had gotten some pilot training but never bothered to get that certificate. And in one hot day in 2018, the man and his teenage son climbed aboard the Cirrus. The airplane climbed to about 200 feet at a slow airspeed, then it stalled and impacted the terrain, killing both of them. The density altitude was almost 7,000 feet that day. And again, for those non-pilots, that means the air doesn't work as well. The airfoils, the lifting surfaces don't work as well in a higher density altitude. Things you learn when you go and get your certificate. And I could go on and on with sad stories like this, unlicensed pilots crashing and taking others with them. Now, some of you may argue that the certificate makes no difference. The training you have to go through and the check ride you have to successfully complete does impact your pilot skills. And while I'm sure there are skilled pilots who never bothered to get a certificate, the mindset that this choice takes is one that tends to lead to crashes. It's the dysfunctional mindset that says, I'm above the rules and I'm invincible, anti-authority. This is really bad judgment to go and fly like this and to risk other people's lives. That's even worse. And if you're such a great and skilled pilot that doesn't need a certificate, well, prove it. Take the check ride with an examiner, a third party, an objective source, someone who's trained to judge your skills and competency, because everyone that flies thinks they're great. So get somebody else to be able to say that. And that's what another benefit of the certificate and the check ride is. If you don't want to do that, at least hire a pilot to fly with you and be the official pilot in command, even though you can manipulate the controls. That's totally fine. I worked with an executive who bought a Cirrus SR-22. He had over 100 hours of training, but he never got his certificate. He knew his limitations. He never flew without a licensed pilot and usually a certified instructor in the seat next to him. And I agree that yes, a piece of plastic won't save your life. But even for us certified pilots, it's a great reminder that we need to constantly train and not just be legal, but be proficient. Our lives and the lives of our passengers and somebody on the ground underneath are at stake. So keep training, get proficient. And if you decide to keep flying without a certificate, well, the FAA really doesn't have much teeth in this instance. They can take away a certificate, but if you don't have one, there's not a lot left for them to do, possibly fines. But where the teeth are is in the federal regulations, and the federal government can file charges, everything from serving as an airman without a certificate, which has actually prison time, to worse if there's injury or death involved, as that former flight instructor is discovering that I talked about, that it continued to instruct without his certificate. Bottom line, if you want to fly, get training and get that certificate which proves you have the skill set to fly safely. Well, that's our report today. And thanks to our sponsors like Clemens Insurance for making it possible for us to do this. ClemensInsurance.net and Marshall Protective Services, personal protection elevated in NPSprotects.com. Thanks for watching. And if you found this report informative, check out this one right here that we recently did. Remember, superior judgment trumps superior skills. Take care.